You're listening to New Retirement Radio, brought to you by the team at Prout Financial Design.
Hello, I'm your host, Certified Financial Planner, Dennis Prout.
I'm Heidi Cartwright, Financial Advisor and RICP.
Advisors associated with Prout Financial Design may be either 1. Registered representatives with and securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC, and investment advisor representatives of Integrated Partners, a registered investment advisor, or 2. Solely investment advisor representatives of Integrated Partners, a registered investment advisor and not affiliated with LPL Financial. Investment advice offered through Integrated Partners, a registered investment advisor. Integrated Partners and Prout Financial Design are separate entities from LPL Financial. Dennis Prout and Nathan Prout are solely investment advisor representatives of Integrated Partners and are not affiliated with LPL Financial. The opinions voiced in this show program are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriately qualified professional before making a decision.
WTCM News Talk 580, welcome aboard to another episode of New Retirement Radio with Prout Financial Design. Joining us in the house today, we welcome Heidi Cartwright. Good morning, Heidi.
Good morning, Ron.
Heidi ho.
It's my pleasure to be here today. It's July 17th, so we're in the middle of July already, and I brought a couple of people with me this morning. I have Nathan Prout. Good morning, Nathan.
Good morning.
Hello, Nathan.
Wonderful to be here.
Yes, and Nathan is our managing director over at the office. And then we have down at the end of the table, we have Beth Shire.
Good morning, Heidi. Good morning, Ron.
Good morning.
Good morning, Beth. And Beth is our director of marketing, and she makes all these wonderful events happen and keeps us on track, that's for sure.
Where's Dennis?
Dennis is off. He's enjoying the summer. He has a lot of visits with grandchildren scheduled, and he's also working on a couple of projects that he wants to accomplish this summer. So.
Did he okay that with the managing director?
Parts of it.
Okay.
So today we have a really interesting topic, but first I want to invite any callers, Ron, to call in or text in if you could help them with that.
You can do that. One number for either option. Call or text 231 area code 9470023 9470023.
Yes, and we also have a replay of this show if you want to hear it again because it's going to be so good on Saturday morning at 9 a.m. So today we have a big topic. We sort of touched on it last week, but we had a guest that last week, and that is the big, beautiful bill. A lot of people out there know that that happened. President Trump's one big, beautiful bill was signed into law. Investors are now turning their attention to the impact that the massive tax legislation could have on the U.S. economy and the financial markets. So we have an article today from Capital Group, and it has 4 different views on this legislation. So what they did is they talked to 4 different economists and got their viewpoints on what the bill is going to mean to different parts of the economy. So among many other provisions, the law permanently extends the large tax cuts initially adopted as part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. Now, if you think back to 2017, that Tax Cut and Jobs Act reduced the income tax rates. So, for example, we had the 15% bracket became the 12% bracket. The 25% bracket became the 22% bracket, and so on and so forth. So that is what has become permanent. So that's going to help most or all of us, just that part. The bill also reduces taxes on tips and overtime pay and makes accountability adjustments to Medicaid, food assistance, and other social safety net programs. So our first economist that we're going to review is Daryl Spence, and his section is called Tax Cuts May Spur Growth, but Rising Debt is Worrisome. And I think a lot of us do worry about the federal deficit. So tax cuts should be modestly supportive of the U.S. economic growth this year and next. Whether the fiscal stimulus makes up for any headwinds created by a tariff-fueled trade war, that still remains to be seen. The law is expected to keep U.S. deficits around 7% of GDP in the coming years, and high debt levels generally lower the long-term potential of growth of the economy as interest payments become and crowd out other spending priorities. This year, we've already seen interest expense on the deficit exceed the level of spending on the defense budget. So defense spending, that's really big.
It's not a small budget item, right?
So we're paying more interest than we're spending on defense. So that becomes a concern of how much of our tax money and how much is going towards just servicing the debt that we have out there. For investors, the rising U.S. deficits could mean higher interest rates down the road as the federal government has to sell more Treasury securities, while buyers might be slightly more reluctant to purchase them. Higher deficits may also result in a steepening of the yield curve. That is, investors demanding more yield for long-time bonds relative to short-term bonds. So it's going to play a role, that deficit plays a role in how much interest rate is going to be on the different products, like the Treasury notes, the Treasury bills, the Treasury bonds. And that's what he's getting at.
Yeah, some of those longer-term rates are certainly attractive if you are in the market for bonds right now. Might be a good opportunity, depending on all your other circumstances, of course, to look at some long-term bonds in your portfolio. So.
Right, and he continues, given the balance of events, including these tax cuts and ongoing trade war and signs of slowing economic growth, we may see the U.S. Federal Reserve begin to reduce federal funds rate later this year, particularly if we experience significant uptick in unemployment. However, rising inflation could make that decision increasingly difficult. So as all these data points come in to the Fed, it's a complicated decision whether enough movement has happened in those data points to warrant a reduction in the interest rate. So that's what they struggle with at all their meetings.
Among other things, yes.
Among other things. I'll say, we're going to continue on.
Yeah,
and we have John Queen, who is a fixed income portfolio manager at Capital Group. And he says that bond markets are adapting to higher debt levels. So I thought he was a little bit more optimistic. Concerns about rising U.S. debt levels are nothing new. When I first started in finance 35 years ago, the biggest worry was the sustainability of our national debt. I don't mean to trivialize. How do you say that? Trivialize. Thank you.
Yeah.
I do need assistance every once in a while. Trivialize the issue, as we have seen significant increase in long-term debt relative to the size of the U.S. economy, particularly over the past decade. Despite that, the U.S. dollar's unique position as the world's primary reserve currency continues to go largely unchallenged. And I would just add to that, his comment there, we do hear discussion about that could be at risk, that the dollar being the primary currency could be at risk. And we know that China and Russia have both been trying to wiggle into that arena. So it is a concern out there, but he generally feels like they're not serious threats at this point. So it is also important to keep in mind that the interest rate market is incredibly efficient. As big as the U.S. Treasury market is, the swaps and the futures, market investors, and all these things that investors use to trade around U.S. rates is vastly larger. So it's not just the bills and the notes themselves, it's all the other products that are based on those. So it is very good at looking past current worries, focusing on the long term and putting a fair price on the risks and opportunities for investors. So he closes out his section by saying, certainly as a bond investor, I do worry about the size of the debt and what it might mean for financing costs. But when that worry may actually become a reality is unknown, and it has been for decades. Many people have predicted the catastrophe is right around the corner, and someday one of them is probably going to be right. Unfortunately, they are just guessing, so I'm not going to predict it. I am instead going to say that I think the market is good at pricing in those concerns. So I felt he was a little more optimistic than the first gentleman.
Yeah.
So moving right along, let's talk about some of the industrial sectors of the economy that are going to be affected by the one big beautiful bill. So from an equity market perspective, the law is poised to potentially deliver a meaningful boost for capital-intensive companies reshoring manufacturing to the U.S., as well as those carrying significant research and development expenses. Likely beneficiaries of the law include industrial machinery manufacturers, heating and ventilation system providers, pharmaceutical innovators, semiconductor companies, and major technology firms. So banks could also see near-term upside given the capital raising necessary for all these large products. We heard President Trump this week, I think he went to Pennsylvania, and he was announcing one after another of these big investments in the energy sector, and they're going to need money to do these projects, and so the banks are expected to benefit from that. So a key provision for business owners and for businesses out there is that the law opened the door for immediate expensing of certain equipment and R&D costs on corporate tax returns. So instead of spreading out that depreciation over years or multiple years, you can, for some of these investments, you can expense it all in 1 year, which helps the tax that would be owed on income for that certain company. So that could make a difference whether somebody's going to go ahead and do a project or hold off on a project. So an expanded tax credit for building semiconductor plants on American soil could strengthen domestic production for companies such as Micron Technology and the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, along with suppliers of cutting-edge semiconductor equipment. Certain defense contractors stand to benefit as well, thanks to billions of dollars earmarked for missile systems and shipbuilding. Yet for all its support of certain strategic industries, the law also delivers some changes to other industries. So for example, we could look at the car industry, and the $7,500 tax credit for electric cars is going to be expiring. So that might affect the auto industry. And also the renewable energy sector, incentives for solar and wind energy providers have been rolled back. So we might see less of investment in those sectors in the future. So he continues and says large deficits could fan the embers of inflation. So what do we do if inflation is coming? Well, what he says, the author suggests concentrating on companies that can sustain pricing power, defend profit margins, and pass on rising costs in case we enter an inflationary environment. So that's where he's looking for the future investment sector. So then we come to our final economist. Some of you may be very glad we're on the final one after all of this. But this gentleman is Jan Sondergaard, and he is a currency analyst. What Jan has to say is he says investors should remain focused on the near-term determinants of the dollar's performance, namely relative economic growth dynamics and tariff policy. It's important to recognize that the law's potential to stimulate domestic growth may partially offset the adverse impact of increased debt servicing costs. The net effect on the dollar will likely hinge on the balance between fiscal expansion and investor confidence in the U.S. economic resilience. So this gentleman takes a little bit of a different look. He says the U.S. continues to offer positive real interest rates, making the dollar more attractive to investors. The dollar has shown an orderly decline this year, mainly reflecting adjustments to the U.S. economic growth prospects, which imply narrowing the gap between U.S. growth rates and interest rates with those of Europe and other parts of the world. But overall, bouts of dollar volatility may occur near term, but tariff policy and growth remain the market's driving forces. Despite questions around the dollar's bull run coming to an end, we are unlikely to be at a major turning point in that cycle. We would need to see either the U.S. growth sharply weaken or growth in the rest of the world pick up strongly for a period of extended dollar weakness. So what he's really saying by that very complex statement that he just made is that he feels that something very dramatic from the current course that we're on is going to happen, or would have to happen, to throw the dollar off from where it is right now. So I think he's closer to the second gentleman we talked about in his relative calmness as to the dollar remaining the primary currency out there. So it's interesting perspective, and this is a view at like 30,000 feet, looking at the whole broad economy and interest sectors. But when we come back from after our break, Nathan is going to drill down into the things that actually affect you personally and that you might want to be aware of.
Yeah, so now we're going to get into some more specifics on the new big, beautiful bill. So this article is by Laura Saunders with Wall Street Journal. So her view is that the short answer on the new One Big Beautiful Bill is that unlike with the tax overhauls of 1986 and 2017, most of the changes for individuals aren't radical, except for an expansion of the cap of state and local tax deductions to $40,000 from $10,000. So, instead, the legislation makes permanent many key changes from 2017 that were set to expire at the end of 2025, like Heidi was talking about earlier. So these expirations would have raised taxes and disrupted planning for many filers. The biggest effect of this new law is certainly on major tax provisions, and we haven't had that in a long time, says Tim Steffen, Director of Advanced Planning at Baird. Notably, the tax brackets individuals have gotten used to won't change. The rates set in 2017 will stand at 10, 12, 22, 24, 32, 35, and 37%. Many filers especially value the 22% and 24% brackets, which stretch from about $100,000 to $400,000 for married joint filers, and half that for single filers. This swath of income at nearby rates can ease planning, such as Roth IRA conversions or stock option exercises.
Yeah, because if you were considering, like, you felt pressured to do a Roth conversion this year because the tax rates were expiring, now you can maybe space it out over a number of years in the future if it fits better with your tax strategy.
But also, yeah, it's still not bad to feel that pressure because Roth conversions are great sometimes. So also retained is the 2017 overhaul's near doubling of the standard deduction, which is the amount taxpayers get to subtract from income if they don't itemize deductions on Schedule A. This fundamental change has simplified taxes for many and reduced the number of itemizers, and I thought this was very interesting, from 30% to less than 10%.
That's a big drop, and you can see that it'll make processing tax returns faster and
right.
That probably save people money. It's not great for H&R Block, but I mean, tax preparers probably took a hit on that.
Yeah, I think they'll be all right.
It's still pretty complicated, even without itemizing. So
it made taxes a lot easier. I mean,
It
it's
did.
yeah.
It did.
A lot of less of that flipping back and trying to find the chart. And
Yep.
So because of a sweetener, the standard deduction for 2025 will be $15,750 for single filers and $31,500 for married joint filers, and rise with inflation after that, according to the Tax Foundation. The legislation also makes permanent the $2,000 child tax credit enacted in 2017 and raises it a bit. Starting in 2025, the base amount will be $2,200 per child, according to the Tax Foundation, and it will be indexed for inflation going forward. The estate and gift tax has new clarity as well. So for 2025, the exemption is $13.99 million per individual, but that was set to drop to about $7 million in 2026. The new law sets a permanent base of $15 million per person starting in 2026 with inflation adjustments after that.
And that could be really important, especially for those business owners that are passing on or selling businesses to the next generation. All of a sudden you have this influx of cash. If we went down to $7 million, if some of the homes here, have increased the value of your estate, and put on that selling a business, you could hit that $7 million. So going up to almost $14 million gives a lot more space there. Right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Other changes more or less maintain the status quo. The alternative minimum tax has been adjusted so it doesn't catch millions of filers in 2026 and beyond. And the 20% qualified business income deduction for pass-through entities still applies. In addition, the personal exemption, miscellaneous itemized deductions, and moving expenses for many filers that were dropped by the 2017 overhaul are now gone permanently.
Oh, so you can't expense out those moving expenses anymore.
Right. The mortgage interest rate or mortgage interest deduction will still be allowed only for up to $750,000 of eligible debt with no adjustment for inflation. So no mortgage interest rate deduction for the lake house, it sounds like.
Yeah.
The new law doesn't alter key provisions for investment taxes or retirement saving. So the top rate on long-term capital gains and certain dividends remains 20% plus a 3.8% surtax, and the contribution levels and rules for traditional and Roth IRAs and 401ks continue to apply. Still, there are a host of changes and some new provisions in the legislation that could affect planning for this year and next. So here are some notable ones. The SALT deduction expansion. The new law expands the Schedule A deduction for state and local property income or sales tax from $10,000 per return to $40,000 for taxpayers with income up to $500,000, and phases down to $10,000 after that. This provision takes effect for tax year 2025 and expires at the end of 2029.
And this was a very controversial item that I know they went back and forth in as they crafted the legislation.
Yeah.
So that's for high tax states. If you make a good income and you live in California or New York and you've got a state income tax and you've got city taxes, you can deduct those from your earnings. It used to be but only $10,000 worth. And a lot of people got mad the first time around. So now up to $40,000. Some people pay up to $40,000 in state and local taxes,
which is crazy. Yes.
Yeah. But now they can deduct that much.
But they do have that income limit
of 500,000.
Yeah, if you make more than that, and then it expires in 2029. So it's not permanent like some of these other decisions.
Yeah. So if you are a filer who will benefit from this change, you should evaluate the timing of other Schedule A items, such as charitable contributions, to maximize benefits. So those facing the $500,000 threshold might want to lower modified adjusted gross income, say by making donations through IRA charitable distributions, if possible. So charitable donations. The new law has two key changes, and both take effect for tax year 2026. So starting next year, donors will be allowed to deduct $1,000 for single filers and $2,000 for joint filers, even if they don't itemize on Schedule A. So a new limit on charitable donations for itemizers will also take effect next year. It disallows a portion of the deduction equal to 0.5% of a filer's modified adjusted gross income. So a filer with $300,000 of MAGI would get no deduction for the first $1,500 of charitable donations. And givers who want to avoid it should consider accelerating donations into 2025.
And another thing you probably want to add into the mix when you're looking at all this with your charitable donations. Also, if you're RMD age and you are utilizing the qualified charitable distribution for some of your charitable distributions, you want to work in concert with this additional $1,000 or $2,000 that you're allowed. So you want to talk to your tax professional or your financial advisor and come up with a strategy of what fits best with your tax return.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So some additional ones. During Trump's campaign, he called for several targeted tax breaks. All have been limited compared with what was promised, and each takes effect for 2025 and lapses at the end of 2028. So the no tax on Social Security provision has become an extra deduction of $6,000 per person age 65 or older for single filers, with income up to $75,000 and joint filers up to $150,000 before phasing out. This is in addition to the regular standard deduction and the additional standard deduction for seniors already in the law.
So that could help some people out there.
Yeah. The no tax on tips provision allows for deduction up to $25,000 for single filers with income up to $150,000 and joint filers up to $300,000 before phasing out. The Treasury Department will compile a list of who qualifies for that one. The no tax on overtime provision allows a deduction up to $12,500 for single filers with income up to $150,000 and $25,000 for joint filers with income up to $300,000 for qualified overtime pay. And the no tax on car loan interest provision allows a deduction up to $10,000 of interest on loans to purchase passenger cars.
I didn't hear about that one before.
Yeah, there is a bit of a caveat on that one, and that the car has to be assembled in America, I believe, for that one.
So maybe something to check before you buy a car. Exactly where was this made?
Mm-hmm.
Where was it assembled? Yeah. So the green energy provisions, as you alluded to, Heidi, those are sunsetting. So the new law ends several of these earlier than anticipated. So taxpayers who want tax credits on new or previously owned clean vehicles must now place them in service by September 30th of this year, not the end of 2032.
So that's a little quicker than maybe you might have anticipated. So
Yeah, that's
just
very
a couple months
accelerated.
out there.
Yeah. And
Start looking now.
Right. The deadline for qualifying for the energy efficient home improvement credit is now December 31st of this year, not the end of 2032. And the deadline for qualifying for the residential clean energy credit is now December 31st of this year and not the end of 2034. 529 education savings plans. The legislation does expand tax-free withdrawals from these popular accounts to include more K through 12 expenses plus expenses for certifications and licenses such as HVAC work. This expansion takes effect starting in 2026.
So that's a lot of information.
Yeah.
And to make it more confusing, some things start this year, some things start in September, some things don't
Phase
start
out in
until
2028.
2026. Yeah.
Right.
So we will revisit this even again. I think, Beth, we have a special, like John Sluice will be coming up on the radio show in September to go over this again. So at this first pass, you can think about some of the questions you may have. And when is that show?
Oh, goodness. Heidi, you put me on the spot.
Sorry.
I think it's September 19th.
Okay.
Double check me, Nathan, see if I'm right. But so he'll be on the radio with us.
All right. We have questions for the panel here today. Someone said, so, Nathan, were you saying QCDs, qualified charitable deductions, are limited to just $1,000 in 2026?
No.
No.
That
was a little unclear. It said even if you didn't itemize, you could still deduct $1,000 for a single person?
You could, yeah. So now if you're talking about the limit for qualified charitable distributions, that's still at $100,000
A year.
a year, and I believe that's also indexed for inflation.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah.
So if you don't itemize, they make it easier, so you don't itemize. But maybe why did they do that? Maybe to encourage more charitable giving?
Right. So if you're talking about giving away $50,000 or $70,000 in a qualified charitable distribution, you're itemizing your taxes. Yeah. So somebody who's not itemizing because they don't have a lot of taxable income can still get a deduction of up to $1,000.
An additional $1,000. Okay.
And for people who aren't QCD age, this $1,000 gives them the opportunity, even if they're not itemizing, to get some kind of tax break for actually contributing. So hopefully it will increase charitable deductions.
It's interesting the way it used to be before this, like $30,000 now for a couple, or $31,000 for the standard deduction. Mm-hmm. Before that, you might have had to itemize all your charitable deductions, and you still wouldn't even make it as to $31,000.
Right. Yeah.
So now you get the $31,000 off the top, plus another $1,000 if you donate.
Or $2,000 if you're married filing joint. Yeah.
Good deal. Okay.
So.
Let's see. How does the government know how much of your income is from overtime so it's not taxed? Is there new reporting requirements?
Yeah. So that's broken out in your pay stub, and I believe that's also broken out on your W-2. Wow. So it'd be pretty easy to, easy. Okay. But your tax professional or your tax professional software should be able to decipher that without too much difficulty. So you might have to get it off
a pay stub or something, but yeah.
All right, that's it for the questions here. You've got some information on what, the Trump account, or we got another one just came in hot off the press. Can you estimate your charitable deduction at $1,000? Can you estimate your charitable deduction at $1,000? You'd probably have to attach receipts to your return, right?
You need to have receipts to justify taking the deduction. As you do for everything else, like medical expense deduction.
Even a lot of the tax software, like H&R Block, I believe, as well as, and this is not necessarily an endorsement, TurboTax, but they have additional software when you're trying to calculate your charitable contributions that will value what those are worth, which is really helpful for giving away, clothing or furniture items or anything like that too. So you can reasonably estimate, but just be ready to prove it as well. So
as always, check with a tax professional.
That's correct.
Yes, indeed. So Beth, you have some stats for us over there?
Yes, I do. In June, the U.S. federal government recorded a surprising $27 billion surplus, a significant turnaround from the $316 billion deficit in May. This surplus was largely driven by increased tariffs revenue and customs duty, reaching approximately $27 billion. A substantial increase from previous months.
Yeah, I think I saw too that was the first time there had been a surplus in a month for the government since 2005.
Oh, that far.
It's been a minute.
Wow.
They do say June is a lot of quarterly payments come in. So that's another
That would be a part of it too, yeah.
Well, it's been a long time since we have a surplus, and it's actually exciting. Oh, it actually can happen.
Right.
Whether or not it can happen consistently is a whole different question.
Oh, that's a whole different story.
Take it as it comes, right? So, and in June, the Dow Jones Industrial Average increased by just over 4%. The S&P 500 rose 4.5%, and the NASDAQ Composite jumped almost 6%. And that's from Bloomberg. And then we have, 1 moment, please hold.
1 moment, please.
Here we go. Okay. New listings fell by 1% between July of last year and June of 2025, which is the first decline in nearly 6 months. However, the weekly average mortgage rate fell by just over 6.5% during June of this year, which is the lowest level since April of 2025. That's from Redfin.
Okay.
So it fell to 6.5%. Is that what it's saying?
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Which is great.
You said it's the lowest since April of 2025. Like, that was a long time ago, way back in April.
Yeah.
I know. Actually,
Like way back 4 months ago.
it's funny, but the way that this year has flown by, April does seem like quite a while ago, actually. Lots happened. So the SEC has issued guidance and disclosure requirements for exchange-traded products related to cryptocurrencies, making the first steps towards regulation and the streamlining of the application process. That's from Reuters, which is great news. They're trying to start regulating that arena and things like that and opening it up for investment opportunities.
Yeah, it's been
More.
quite the month, really,
Yeah.
for crypto. I think Bitcoin has been on just another tear, as well as even Ethereum. Not that we're necessarily endorsing that, but
But you think there are
it's
a lot of-
interesting to see as the legislation and more of that recognizes that the amount of inflows going into cryptocurrencies has been significant to watch.
Don't you think still a good chunk of the population is ignorant to what all that means? I am.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, something that these new bills, and I think one of the bills out there right now that they're talking about is the Genius Bill. But I think there's several, 2 or 3 of these endeavors to add some structure to cryptocurrency. Because right now, a lot of investment places, their hands are tied as to being able to offer these investments to just their regular clients. You may need to have a sophistication in the financial area to even be able to invest in some of these things. And like you said, Ron, it's hard to get your mind around it, but if some structure is set down where you're comparing same to same, it might help you make those decisions, whether it's something you want to invest in or maybe something you don't want to. And you always have to go back to your own risk tolerance. But having that structure, I think, is going to be positive for the industry and the investments themselves, because people will be more on the same playing field. They'll have something to fall back on for data and understanding the products.
Yeah. Kind of seemed like an abstract idea or concept,
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Especially if they're available on, the normal platforms, and you don't have to look at a specialized platform just to buy it as well, too. So, yeah.
So diving back into the big, beautiful bill, one industry is particularly unhappy with the OBBB, the gambling industry. This new legislation will change how gamblers are taxed. Under the big, beautiful bill, if someone wins $100,000 in a year of gambling but loses $100,000 in that same year, they're still responsible to pay the $10,000 in taxes. No breaking even. So some are...
So those professional gamblers out there might
Right.
need to start rethinking some of their career choices, potentially. Maybe.
All right. All right, so we're going to turn to a different topic for just a few minutes. And we had an article that came to us from Kiplinger. And the title of this article is, "How much does it cost to be a grandparent?" And of course, there's no one answer to that. But I thought it was interesting because they did a study on this. It was the senior list. Did a study on how much on average are people spending in that area. I mean, you can't put a cost on grandchildren. From what I hear, they're wonderful. Hopefully someday I'll know. But do you know how much it costs? So we took that closer look, and this was a 2025 study, and they found that 96% of grandparents have incurred costs from having grandchildren. I'm surprised that it isn't 100%.
Oh,
Spending an average of $3,948 to financially support them. So I thought that was interesting that we're about at $4,000 on
$4,000 ahead.
Yeah, when I had originally read this article, I was like, $4,000, that seems a bit steep. But then when you go break it down, and it goes quickly.
Well, think of all those cute things you see out there that you're like, ooh, when I have grandchildren. But so here's a list of various categories that grandparents support their grandchildren in. Supporting large purchases like buying cars, helping with down payments on a home. They also help with tuition for school or college, housing expenses, vacations. Some contribute to 529 accounts or college funds, day-to-day expenses, regular contributions or allowances. Some are gifts for special occasions like, graduation, marriage, other things like that. Clothing and dining out. Tutoring is also another area where grandparents help out. And healthcare and entertainment round out that list of things that money usually goes to. So one thing that the article does point out is that when you are a grandparent, you want to do some planning or have some kind of budget as to how much you're going to spend in order to be able to give these gifts or enjoy these things with your grandchildren. So they say you want to at least make a pass at looking at how much you are willing to do and what you want to do and how you want to invest that money. Because you don't want to endanger your own retirement by being overly generous and putting yourself in a bad situation. So the pros of spending money on your grandchildren include stronger family ties, lasting legacy, giving opportunities to the next generations, tax benefits, and the number one is personal joy. Cons can be your impact on your savings and retirement accounts, giving you emotional stress, giving you less flexibility in your investments and what you want to do, and it can also complicate your tax situation. So you want to make sure when you're giving gifts that you're asking your financial advisor or your tax advisor about, like, how can I do this? What's the most tax efficient way? What should I give? Should I give money? Should I give stock? There's so many different ways to pass on and support your grandchildren in their different endeavors, and it's a good idea to just plan it out a little bit instead of not planning.
Yeah, that's right.
By the way, we did have a text message here with American flag emojis and an eagle emoji that says, just a little praise for the Prout team for their 4th of July program. It was better than what the big networks had.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thanks. That's really
Glad
nice
you enjoyed
of you.
it.
Yes, we had fun putting that
Yeah.
together, and we like to do that. It's something that we try to do every year. So thank you for the positive feedback.
That's right. So if you have any further questions or would like to discuss any of the information or maybe some of the information we didn't go over today, please call us and set up a complimentary consultation. Our number is 231-947-3992.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for us today. Prout Financial Design's new retirement radio. Heidi Cartwright, Nathan Prout, and Beth Shire, thank you all.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Ron.
Thanks, Ron.